Hey everyone, welcome to the Creek. My name's Jared Miller and I'm the ministry lead here. And I'm super excited to be joined by one of my old friends, a guy I've known for fully 10 years at this point, colleague in ministry. He was one of my groomsmen in my wedding. So he's known me for a long time as well. Grant Vissers is the lead pastor at Knox Church in Waterdown, Ontario, kind of outside of Hamilton. And he's agreed to come on and share with us some wisdom around storytelling and social media. So Grant, thanks for being here and welcome to the Creek.
Hey, thank you. No, this is fun. It's your wedding feels like a long time ago.
Because at least looking at pictures and flips through the wedding book and she's like, there's Daddy. And she goes, she names all the people. And I look at those pictures and I'm like, man, I was just a kid. So young.
We went for hot shaves, and I think that's the last time I was clean shaven.
Yeah, probably.
No, it's good. Hey, it's good to be here. I've had you on my podcast, right? I think so. I think we did an episode. Did we do an episode?
I don't think so, but that's okay.
Or even we talked about it. So it's fun to be on this side. It's fun to be on this side of the microphone.
Yeah, this has been a fun kind of foray into ministry, and you were there for me at kind of the beginning of figuring out how to navigate this kind of digital ministry space, and so I knew that I wanted to get a chance to sit down with you and chat about some of this stuff because you're good at this. You're good at storytelling, and you're good at storytelling with a visual kind of medium, and so I mean, but let's just jump into it. Social media. That's what I wanted to talk about because it's one of these things that feels like it is. It feels like it's a burden. Like there's a new documentary out on Netflix, kind of about the social dilemma, and the burden of social media is a weird thing for churches to kind of navigate. And so I just wanted to get a sense how has your kind of experience of social media changed since in the last 6 months?
Yeah, man. What hasn't the last 6 months changed? Just everything. So yeah, I think specifically to our conversation and to what you and I get to do every day, and that is, church life and world, and like that's kind of the place that we've operated for, at least over this much of our career. We've always seen, I think the church has always seen social media as an avenue into ministry. So it's like another marketing campaign or strategy. It's like, how do you attract people or communicate with people in order to get them into a place where you can do ministry with them? So it's like an avenue, right? You put stuff on YouTube to invite people in. You give them snapshots of messages so that maybe they'll come to church, to a worship service in person, and you can connect with them there. Or you're putting out information. It's very one directional. Like it's just you putting out information, you putting out stuff in the hopes that people will join you in a more real way is kind of the way we've always had a tendency of looking at it. And like, obviously some people see it differently and, everybody looks at it a little bit differently, but I think overwhelmingly so, the church has viewed it as this avenue into ministry. And what the last 6 months has shown us is that social media is the place where ministry now has to take place. And that was always the case, or at least I think that always should have been the case. But it was just so natural for it to be like, well, what are our publication channels, right? So we're putting stuff on our website. We've got an email list. We talk to people on a Sunday during announcements. We try to put stuff in their hands. We, maybe you take out an ad in a paper. Oh, and also you're on Instagram, and maybe you're on YouTube if you're lucky. Forget Snapchat, TikTok, whatever. Like you're not even touching those places. It's just you're trying to get people into ministry, like a ministry, whatever that is. And now, like, we're in the situation where, for us anyways, in Canada, for most of us, certainly where you and I are, everything was shut down. So like, churches weren't able to meet in person. For a long time, I was doing sermons from my house, and the team, like the music team, was doing so. We were putting everything together, and so social media became the place where we were doing ministry. It was no longer just a publication sort of channel. It was, no, these are now the places where real conversations are taking place. It's Zoom. If you're lucky, it's Zoom, because that's, at least, Zoom or FaceTime or something in real time. But for a lot of people, it's the comment section on YouTube videos. It's the, DMs in Instagram. It's comments. It's like, that's how people were interacting, and that's how relationships were building. So I think that's one of the shifts. And that shift was already happening. At least it already should have happened. Just like everything, the last 6 months accelerated it. It's like, let's take 6 years of progress and jam it into 6 months. And I think that's what we've seen.
If you could go back and tell your post-COVID self something, one thing about how social media was going to be different, what would it be?
Yeah. You know what? I think it would probably be consume less and create more. That's one of the things that I've been like personally wrestling with. So like, as I've jumped onto YouTube, which, thank the good Lord Jesus, like I decided January 1, I'm like, I'm going to start YouTube. And I've been toying with it. Like, I've been toying with it for years. So, I had a podcast for a couple of years. We did 2 seasons. Anyways, it was purely audio. And like, I kept like, there was this nagging thing that I was like, I want to jump on YouTube. I want to start YouTube. But I always wrestled with this, like, no, I'm called to be a pastor. That was like my profession. It is my profession. It's what, it's what I believe God has gifted me to do, communicate the gospel. And I always saw those things as like competing. I'm like, if I jump on YouTube, it's going to be a distraction, because I love it. Like, I love learning about the gear. Like we were talking before, when we jumped on the call before we started recording this, like, cameras, what microphones, like how do you shoot stuff and create different shots? How do you crash your drone into a lake and hopefully survive? Like, all of those things. Like, I love that. And I'm like, I always felt like it was like it was going to compete with my call as a pastor, because for me, it was a mental shift away from, this is what it looks like to be a pastor. These are my expectations on myself of what it means to be a pastor. And also, these are other people's expectations on me of what it means to be a pastor. Right. So like, you just have those things that everybody thinks in your church a pastor does all the time, and these things that you don't. And anyways, I always saw it as competing. And so finally, like January, I'm like, I'm going to do it. And I loved it. And then March hit, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like maybe there was a reason why like that I just felt so lucky to be in that place of, still a complete newbie person figuring it out, like still completely new. But on the other hand, like, I'm like, oh, there is tremendous value for this. And it was like, in those months, I was able, like January, February, I was able to really enjoy creating without the pressure of having to, and figure it out and learn, and kind of, stop consuming as much content and start creating more content. And then on March 15th, which for us in Ontario, March 15th was the first Sunday that we went entirely online. We decided Saturday, it was like Saturday. So Saturday night, like I was up until 3 a.m. shooting and editing and getting this full service up for the next day. And suddenly, and I was talking to my wife about this like a couple of days ago. It was suddenly like the social media YouTube video part was now part of my call as a pastor in such a seamless and peaceful way that, man, I was like, you know what? That was just a gift of God, that I was interested in it for years before, but now, just for me personally, it was this piece of, all right, it's not a choice. Like, we're stepping into this now. This is what we have to do. It was no longer like, is this going to compete with my priorities as a pastor? It's like, no, this is now how I'm going to continue to be a pastor, right? And so for sure there are other avenues, right? Like pick up a phone and you're talking with people and you're still managing teams, and like there are a lot of other things that we do besides content. But like primarily, one of the primary things pastors do is content creation, by way of sermons, Bible studies, teaching, disciples, like all that kind of stuff. And it was now suddenly YouTube was a tool. It was the place where I was able to do that. So consume less, create more, because now that's the rhythm of life. And I wish, no regrets, but I have obviously I have not enjoyed COVID, and global pandemic is terrible, terrible thing. So don't misinterpret me, but like I just have loved being able to create in this way, because for so long it was like, I really felt like, man, I want to do this. I would love to do that. I would love to start creating videos and content as a pastor online. And it's like, for some reason I could never get over that hang up of, is this going to compete in some way that pulls me away from what I perceived as my primary calling. And now it's just seamlessly integrated. And like, I'm still learning. I still, like, this past Sunday, it's not seamless by any stretch of the imagination. This past Sunday, our live stream dropped in the middle of the service and never came back. So, like it's just part of my life now as a pastor, and I enjoy it. And I know that not everybody does. It's not everybody's jam, but for me, I do. I love it.
So as you think about this, I do love that kind of balance between creating and consuming. And I do think that I think our culture really wants to push consumption on us in a lot of ways. Buy more, eat more, exercise more, love more, whatever kind of the narrative of our culture is. And so I like that there's kind of a countercultural kind of bent to it, which is really helpful. When I look at my social media feeds, like if I scroll through Instagram, I see a lot of people posting their best life, their best self. I follow a ton of fitness people on Instagram, and so I see a lot of people who are super fit. I see a lot of people who post about who throw themselves into their families and love their kids, and their stories are just loaded with what their kids are doing these days, and those are all fine things, I think. But for you, in thinking about this idea of creation over consumption, how do you find kind of a personal balance between putting yourself out there and sort of being authentic to who Grant is, but also kind of avoiding making Grant that idol? Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to pick up my phone, which fell partway through this interview because, I knocked it over because I talk with my hands. But yeah, because I just want to look like, I agree, right? When I looked at my social media feed, it's like, and Instagram's the worst. Like, let's just name it that. I think for a filtered life, Instagram is by far like the worst culprit. At least right now, I have TikTok. It's weird. TikTok is a weird place, which I realize just makes me sound old now. Like I am, when we started on Facebook and then our parents jumped on Facebook, so we all moved to Instagram, and now we're now our parents on Facebook. That's, I'm sure, what people feel when we go on. Anyways, it is. When I scroll through my feed, it's a lot of good moments. It's like, I think my greatest post of 2020 is I took compost that we had, like literally it was like scrap food, and I made a quesadilla from it. And even still, it's like this like perfectly filtered image. But the whole point for me was like, everybody's out here posting these perfect shots of like homemade bread and like picturesque. This is where I'm spending like COVID pandemic isolation, just beautiful. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna buck the trend, and I'm gonna make a quesadilla out of compost. It was like scrap onions and cabbage that should have been thrown. And anyways, and I still like it's still filtered. And it is, we live, I don't know, man, we live this filtered life online. I think so. One of the things that, when we were chatting back and forth, is the way you posed it to me, I thought was really helpful. You're like, come on and talk about um, the story we tell on social media. And so that's kind of the line that I thought about over the last like 24, 36 hours, whatever, however long it's been since you sent that exact phrase. And I think that we have to be really careful because we often tell two stories on social media. There's the story we tell others, and then there's also the story we tell ourselves, right? Because I think that part of what happens on social media is you want to present your best moments, and it just is naturally bent in that direction because you want to convince other people that your life is maybe something other than what it is, or even you just inadvertently, like kind of unintentionally do it. You're like, oh, this is a great moment, so I'm going to post it on social media, because you're just naturally prone to doing that. But you're also telling yourself a story too. Like it's this way in which we try to create an identity or persona that is in many ways maybe who we want to be but aren't. And so I think that the best thing we can do on social media is, I think, just be aware of that it's not neutral, right? Social media isn't neutral. It's trying to extract something from you, right? Like Google isn't just a search engine, right? It's data collection, it's cataloging, it's ad revenue, it's trying to sell you things. Like there's no neutral platform online. Facebook isn't a neutral platform for you just to share your life. Instagram isn't a neutral platform down to what you see when you open it up. Like there are very complex algorithms deciding what to put in front of you. And like, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I find them fascinating, but like social media isn't neutral. And I think that as soon as you recognize and realize that, then you go, okay, so that's just one step removed. And then I just think we need to be careful of the stories that we're telling other people, the story that we're telling ourselves. And maybe the closer those things are together, the better. Because it's not about authenticity. Isn't about like an authenticity on social media isn't about sharing everything that happens, like the good, bad, and the ugly. It's not just like vomit everything online and then you're being authentic, but it's about wrestling through the story that you are telling other people, being intentional about that story, but also the story you're telling yourself. Like, why are you posting things? And are you posting in moments because you know that the validation you get is creating something inside of you that you need? Like, it's just, I think we just need to be careful and just aware. And that's a great first step. I mean, I suck at it too. Like my Facebook or Instagram feed, for the most part, is pretty good moments. And then I reserve my stories for when everything falls apart in my life. And even that's interesting because the stories disappear and the feed lasts forever. Yeah, I think that there's a lot going on. You're telling other people stuff. You're also trying to tell yourself something that maybe is or isn't true, or that you want to be true but isn't. And so I think the sooner we realize that it's not neutral, it's not just you putting stuff out. There's always motivation behind it, the better. And then just wrestle with that openly.
That's good. I like that. Yeah. That makes it. I guess maybe I was hoping for an easier answer than wrestle with it openly. But I think that's an important piece to remember, is that none of these things, especially things that are free, are always going to have a cost. Like they're Facebook, even Netflix, Google, whatever, any of this, like I had a conversation with a guy who understands the power of algorithms in a really unique way. And he had a lot to say about this, but I think that's a big thing to kind of think about, is what are the, what are we paying for as we think about this, and that opens conversations about how do we redeem social media. And so, like, thinking about the community aspect of it, thinking about the kind of the togetherness piece of it, particularly with YouTube. I spent a lot of time thinking about YouTube lately. Um, how do you make that kind of, like, is it inherently a one-way street, or how do you build space for dialogue in social media, or on YouTube more specifically?
Yeah, man, that's good, because again, it's just this. It's not a simple answer. So like, I have a tiny YouTube channel, and there's like 160 subscribers or something like that, right? Like, and probably most of them are like friends and family, or like, well, I'll just subscribe, so that he feels good. Right? It's like, you phone your grandma. You're like, can you please subscribe so that I get 100 subscribers and I can make my own YouTube channel name?
Yeah.
But like, so like I don't have a large platform on YouTube.
Yeah.
Was lucky enough to build somewhat of a platform, or stuff through my podcast, and so wrestled with it there as well, because again, like, whenever you're dealing with these platforms that are more intended for like communication of something, so like podcasting is inherently one direction street, a one way street, as is YouTube. It's not like people are I mean, unless somebody is posting video responses to your videos, like, you put out a video and then you can walk away from it.
Mm.
So comments, like, yeah, when it comes to ministry, I think the last thing we want to do is just put something out and walk away.
Mm.
And so you're always trying to get somebody involved in a conversation. It's like, when I preach a sermon, so now it's in our faces again, right? Sermons are up on YouTube all over the place. If I preach a sermon, my goal is for somebody watching that sermon to find their way into community. I don't care if they come to my church or not. I mean, maybe like the ego part of me does, but like, at the end of the day, like, if they're watching in like Nova Scotia, I'm like, great, go find yourself a local church in Nova Scotia. And if this video got you there, that's a massive win. Just like, thanks, Jesus, that you used this weird little video to help somebody, find their way to a bigger community. That's what we're all about, right? Is helping people into a community where they're going to grow in their relationship with Jesus, and grow in their relationship with others, and become a healthier human being. Jesus says to become fully alive, right? Like, that's kind of the goal. Like, this is the goal of the church, is to be a part of that work that God's doing in the world. And so I see all of my social media channels, as it were, as ultimately a way of doing the same thing. That's my goal with it. It's not to build more subscribers or viewers, though that's part of it in a way. The goal is to encourage people into community. And so, you try and I've found this is one thing that I still, largely would say I suck at. But like, you're trying to encourage people into avenues or places where you can have a conversation. So if somebody subscribes to my YouTube channel, hey, go find me on Instagram, because I'm actually likely to respond to DMs on my Instagram.
Mm.
Right. And that's an avenue for a conversation, or like add you to a group chat on Instagram. Making sure that you're responding to comments that are worth responding to. Listen, like, there's garbage on the internet, and there are people who are just, I don't know.
Garbage.
I'll leave it. I'll leave it there, because I don't want to call anybody, like,
Yeah.
but man, like, some people just suck sometimes. And so some stuff is just not worth your time. And like, that's what I find myself, honestly, that's what I find myself saying to kids and teens more and more and more. Some of this stuff is just not worth your time. Some of it is. And the things for me that are worth my time is, are the things that invite people into communication in direct ways. So doing things like leaving a cell phone number for them to text. I'll do that. And you don't have to leave your own cell phone number. Get a dedicated cell phone number for that.
Mhm.
Right. For us as whatever, like as pastors or professional sort of communicators. And, so that's one thing. Leaving emails, pushing people over to Instagram into direct, like DMs. Those are good ways of encouraging people into communication. Obviously, it raises a whole other level of like transparency and accountability that you need. But for me, that's the goal. If I create a video on YouTube and somebody just watches it and enjoys it and gets a little bit of encouragement, that's great. I love that. And if that's all that happens, awesome. But the next step is into community somewhere, right? So that's what I hope for it anyways. Like
Mm.
at the outset is that it's about much more than just creating videos. It's about creating a community.
So, like, you don't see then necessarily the video itself as a place where community can grow. You see that pushing people into, like, does community need to be an in-person kind of thing, or how does, like, what are kind of the basics of community in that kind of frame?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people would have said it had to be in person up until whatever March shutdown date, it is ringing in your ears. Um, but and maybe that's still the ideal, right? Like maybe that is still the ultimate end goal would be some sort of face to face relationship. But like we're 2 time zones away, right? At least if my math adds up, like 2 hours away. And this is fairly face to face. Like, aside from the time that we would spend going to like Peel Pub after philosophy class or whatever, or like Kirby's church history class in Montreal, like this is the closest face to face we've had in a year. Like,
Yeah.
so there's tremendous value in this.
Mm.
And the alternative is that you and I, because of how far away we live, don't have face to face. You and I don't have the option of like saying, hey, you want to go for a run, or you want to go grab dinner, or like we don't have that. This is the best that we have. I mean, maybe like without the cameras and whatever, but like this is the best that you and I have in this moment.
Yep.
And what COVID has done is made that the reality for even like your next door neighbor.
Mm.
And so, yeah, sure. Like maybe the goal is to always get people into like real, like person to person, face to face community, but that's not always possible.
Mm.
And some of the coolest relationships that I've had in ministry, and the most encouraging relationships I've had in ministry, and let's just talk like profession wise. And so, one of the things that we're seeing right now is right across the board, people are quitting, like not just in ministry, but all over the place. Teachers, like administrators, healthcare profession, like everybody's just exhausted. Some of the most encouraging people that I have relationships right now aren't in Hamilton. I mean, like I have some great encouraging relationships in Hamilton. If you're in Hamilton and you're one of my friends, I love you very much. But like what I'm saying is we've all been put into this place where like proximity no longer equals meaningful relationship in the way that maybe it did before. And so, we're able, it's weird, right? It's like, you can't just go to a restaurant with your friends. And so we've had to search out different ways. And
Mm.
so maybe there's like a priority of like a hierarchy of community. And if like real face to face, is the top, or like the ultimate goal where you can like, have all of the good and bad of relationship. This isn't bad. It's not far off. And given the context that we find ourselves in right now, it's pretty good. So yeah, I think maybe if we see it as always trying to encourage people into greater areas or levels of community, whether with us or somebody else, I don't think that like, I don't necessarily see videos as the place where community happens, like inside the video, though that sometimes happens, right? Like YouTube's all about collaboration and like, different creators meet up and do that all the time. What does it allow me to do? It allows me to show a little bit of my family life, me beyond just what you would have seen typically on Sunday as a pastor. Um, and I think people relate to that, and hopefully it shows me in my own sort of community context wrestling this all out in a way that helps you in your community context wrestle it out as well.
Yeah, Kim, trying to think who the author was. Anyway, she talks about you know social media is two words, and we get so caught up on the media side of it, and we forget about the social side of it.
Hmm.
That it's intended, like her definition was that Nona Jones, that's who it was. Her definition seems to be that most of the things we refer to as social media don't actually meet the definition of social media because they're broadcasting platforms.
Yeah.
And they don't kind of give that shared story that I think is so important to growing into the fullness of life together. And so, like, when we think about the story that we do want to tell, and think about this kind of back and forth, and how do we shape it, think about how do we shape each other's stories. How do you see your job as kind of a pastor, as a coach, as a discipler, as a shepherd? How do you see your role kind of helping people more effectively tell their stories?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that I would say is, as a pastor, I think that one of our roles is to continually remind people that they're not the hero in their story.
Mm.
They're not the main character. And so, so for me, and people involved with the Creek, I'm hoping, knowing you, like I think this would be your hope as well. Some of you who are listening are Christians. Some of you who are listening are not. And for me as a Christian, as a pastor, the main hero of the story, like in my life, is Jesus, and is a God who longs to actually have a meaningful relationship with humanity. And like, that's a significant piece, and a significant piece to my story, and the story that I tell is about what that means in my life. And so I think that the more, how do I put this? The more I'm not the hero of my own story. It's like I have a rule where I try really hard, and like some people have challenged me on this. So I realize it's not the only way, and it's just my way at this point in my career. I try really hard not to be the hero of the stories that I use in sermons. Like if I'm talking about myself and like about a moment that has happened that has shaped the way I see God or see myself or see my relationships, chances are I'm not the one who is like the hero of that story. I don't come out looking particularly great some of the time. And I do that on purpose because, as communicators, and we've talked about this, as pastors, as preachers, my congregation only sees me for 1 hour of polished work. Like, think about your job, and then add to that job preparing for me, it's like 30 minutes, like a 30-minute presentation once a week. And like most of what you do is leading up to that moment. You're going to make damn sure that you do a good job of it. And that's how preachers approach preaching is, we take it seriously, and there's something sacred about it and important. And so you don't just get up and like, well, I'm tired today, and I didn't have a cup of coffee, and like, so I'm just gonna like you get up, and even if you're feeling terrible, like you try to do. When people only see that, they get an image of who you are in their head that is so far removed from who you are when you roll out of bed and like, oh shoot, like yesterday I was a terrible husband and I said something that I shouldn't have, and I had to apologize. And what does forgiveness and reconciliation look like actually in my life as a human being? And man, so as soon as you realize that for me, that Jesus is the hero of the story, it takes the pressure off of having to be perfect all the time. Like if I come out of a story looking like, yeah, like I'll never forget this. And you can stop me just, at any point, just say, hey, shut up. We got to move on to the next question. And I know you'll do it. We were doing this series at the last church that I was a pastor. So I've been at Knox and Waterdown for just over a year now. And before that, like 4.5 years at another church. And man, love both of those churches. At the last place that we did this series called Letters to a Skeptic, I think it was, or Words to a Skeptic. And we kind of tackled some of the major challenges that we'd experienced as pastors in people who were skeptical kind of growing up, or even like atheist or non-religious, or some of the questions that people have about Christianity. And I got to preach on hypocrisy. I was like, oh great. Perfect. And so what we did is we did like this 10-minute message, this 10-minute sermon, and then we did live Q&A. And oh my goodness, it was so much fun. But, a couple hundred people there, microphones set up, and we're just like, have at us. Like, any question you want to ask, go for it. And we're like, this is dangerous. We knew that, it could go sideways so quickly, but we're like, it was a great idea that the lead pastor there had. He's like, we're going to do live Q&A. And this is okay. Anyway, so I preach on hypocrisy. And then someone jumps up and asks a question, something along, I don't remember the exact question, something along the lines of like, but what if you just don't measure up? Like, what if you just have, you come to church and everybody's perfect, and Christians are just these, perfect people who live perfect lives. And that's just not me. I'm broken and I'm wrestling and I cannot figure life out. And I don't measure up. And I stood there and I thought for a second. I was like, well, nothing to lose. And I said, just hang around us long enough. And you'll realize that we're all broken too. And I was like, that's not a good enough answer. And I was like, so here we go. Yesterday, I was a jerk to my wife. And it was true. It was a completely true story. I mean, something I can't remember. We were driving downtown Toronto, and it had to do with navigation. So go figure, like stereotypical, whatever. Like my wife and I. Anyways, I said something, and my wife Connie was in tears, and I'm like, great. I'm sitting there in the car on Saturday. I'm like, I got to preach on hypocrisy tomorrow. And I'm like, if somebody asks me, I got to tell this story. I gotta be honest about the fact that today I was not my best. I was not the best husband that day. And, I had to apologize, and I had to, ask for forgiveness, and there had to be mending. And it wasn't terrible, but I was a jerk. I said something stupid. And I had to, we had to figure that out. And I think that, what makes it possible to do that well, and maybe, for those of us who call ourselves Christians, those moments are hopefully possible in your life because you're not the hero of the story. And so you're not worried about, at least ideally, you're not worried about presenting only the perfect moments in your life, because the goal isn't for you to live a perfect life. You can't do it. Nobody, it's just not possible. And so don't pretend like it is. Don't live as though you could do it. Live a real sort of authentic, wrestling it out type life, because at the end of the day, in your weakest moments, you get to point to someone who loves you anyways. And I go, in that moment when I was a jerk of a husband, Jesus still loved me and accepted me, and desperately wanted to work that piece out in my life, but also still had us. And so in that moment you go, yeah, okay, I'm sorry, that was not the best moment in my life. And you're able to work it through, you're able to wrestle it out, you're able to hopefully reach this forgiveness and reconciliation, because you're not trying to pretend to be something you're not. And so then if I were to extend that story, and I'll end here, that sermon for me and that Q&A and that question, you could look at that like social media, right? You have that choice in that moment to answer authentically, to answer in a real way or not. And so hopefully for those of us who get to encourage people along in that direction and remind people, listen, you don't have to be the hero of your story all the time. It's okay. It just frees you up to be honest and to say, today I struggled, but that's okay, because God loves me still, and tomorrow I'll try to be better. And yeah, I mean, some people look at that and they say, great, you're crazy. It just makes you feel better when you mess up. But for me, it's again, like there's a freedom that comes with realizing that you don't have to be the hero in your story.
Absolutely. That's awesome. That's such a good, such a tangible reminder. And I love that you gave me permission to stop you from telling the story when you knew we were on the last question. So it's awesome. Thank you, Grant, for being with us today. This has been such a great conversation. I love the challenge of, and I hope that this conversation has helped everyone who's watching think about how we can all make the stories that we're telling our social networks of people more authentic, be more vulnerable, more intentional, more realistic, more human, which I think is what we're all striving to do. And so Grant, we'll put a link to your YouTube channel down in the description of this video, so make sure you go and subscribe to his channel as well. Show him some love. What else, what can we plug for you?
No, that's it, man. No, it's all good. Thank you. No, this is a blast. And yeah, I think the beauty of conversations like this is, like we're just figuring this out. You and I are just trying to figure this thing out, and we get to have conversations in a way that hopefully help other people figure it out too.
Absolutely.
So no, it's been a blast. Yeah. I mean, listen, if you want to go subscribe to the YouTube channel, super helpful. You could follow me on Instagram. I'm just Grant Vissers, and you feel free to put those links, that link in there as well. And then reach out, let's have a conversation. And that's what I would say to people is, and I learned this doing podcasting, but, there's a lot of power in just asking someone to have a conversation with you. You'd be surprised by the number of people who respond positively to a cold call, right? And who just you say, hey, can I have a conversation with you about this? And people, generally my experience with people has been that they want to help you out and have a conversation. So I would love to have a conversation. If anybody wants to ask more questions, Instagram would be a good place to do that. Facebook, if you want, if that's kind of your jam and you're hanging out there, I'm there as well. I've given up on Twitter, so yeah, probably not there. But for sure, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. If you get me there, that's where you'll have the best chance of getting a response.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Grant, for being here, for your wisdom, and for giving us some sort of, and really personally, just thank you for swimming in this water, figuring out digital ministry with me. It's good to know that we're not the only ones in the boat here at the creek. So we appreciate your wisdom and support, and just all the blessings that you've been over the years. So yeah, thank you so much for being here, and it was awesome getting to chat with you.
Dude, love you, Jared. We'll talk soon.